Welcome to What is Autism, Really? My name is Sarah Hamel. I am a speech therapist who co-created the Autism Included program. This presentation, though, was mostly written by my sister Stephanie, who asked me to narrate. Stephanie is also a licensed speech therapist and inclusion specialist, but before that, she achieved a PhD in genetics. I'm going to tell you about autism, but first, I want to tell you why you should listen to Steph and I. Though her first love was molecular genetics, Steph became interested in speech therapy while I was in graduate school because, like so many times before, I needed her help to get through the material. She had an uncanny ability to consume a massive amount of information, process it, and then teach it back to me in a way I understood. As a therapist, she became interested in supporting communication for everyone in all forms with science-based and ethical practices. I think you should listen to her take on what autism is, not only because she's highly educated, skilled, and intelligent, she's also autistic. This sometimes surprises people. Steph doesn't fit what most people think of as autistic. That's because we have a lot of misunderstanding about what autism is. If you were to ask your doctor about autism, they would likely present you with the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, or DSM, definition of the disorder called autism spectrum disorder. This focuses on the perceived impairments of autistic children as compared to their neurotypical peers. This is not how we and many other professionals in the neurodiversity positive movement view autism. We see it as a neurotype. Autistic researchers are helping change the view of autism from a disorder to seeing it as a way that some brains most naturally learn, communicate, and connect with the world around them. Most people have neurotypical brains. They learn, develop, and communicate in a predictable way that most people understand. Some people, myself included, have brains that learn, develop, and communicate differently. We are neurodiverse. Autistic brains do not develop, process information, or communicate in the same way that neurotypical brains do. But they definitely do learn, develop, and communicate. The specific way a child learns to communicate is likely unique to them, but there are lots of great ways to figure out what works. So what are some differences between autistic and non-autistic brains? You may notice differences in executive functioning and processing. They also learn new information differently and tend to be what's called autodidactic, or they learn by teaching themselves. Monotropism may also play a role. This refers to the tendency of autistic brains to focus strongly on a specific interest, often on details. Neurodiverse brains might also be more easily distracted when they are not hyperfocused. This means those communicating with autistic children must work to become a part of the child's focus and not fight to redirect it. A phenomenon known as the double empathy problem might also be playing a role in communication differences between autistic and non-autistic people. Autistic-led research has uncovered an answer to this question: what is the double empathy problem? Two neurotypical people who perceive the world in similar ways can understand each other's behavior and communication. Studies have shown that despite what was assumed about autistic social skills, two autistic people who perceive the world in similar ways to one another will also be able to understand each other's behavior and communication. The double empathy problem exists when people who perceive the world in such vastly different ways can no longer understand each other's behavior or communication. It isn't that autistic people have a hard time reading social cues or communicating with others. Their skills are likely commensurate with their peers. The problem becomes that neurotypical and autistic brains work differently, so neither can innately understand the other. Because the world is mostly neurotypical and the quote-unquote interventions for autistic children were created exclusively by non-autistic people, it exacerbates the issue and isolates autistic individuals even further. We're hoping that with our strategies, we can begin to work on creating a world where we can work together to understand and accommodate one another, regardless of neurotype. I love this quote from Donna Williams. Right from the start, from the time someone came up with the word autism, the condition has been judged from the outside by its appearances and not from the inside, according to how it is experienced. Take a moment to review this brief history of the theory and treatment of autism. This new research represents a big shift in thinking about what autism is and isn't. Let's look at some autism myths versus facts. It's a myth that autism is a disease. The fact is, autism is a neurotype. Autistic brains process information differently. There's a myth that autistic people can't learn and need behavior training to understand information. Autistic people learn differently. They may benefit from accommodations in traditional learning environments. There's a myth that adults need to stop autistic behaviors through training. In reality, autistic people may behave in ways that are unusual to express themselves or meet a sensory need. These are valid expressions, and safe behaviors don't need to change. It's a myth that autistic people aren't social and don't understand emotion. Autistic people socialize differently and may express emotions differently. You may have noticed that we use language like autistic child and autistic student rather than child with autism. This is because most autistic adults have pushed for using this type of language since it reflects autism as a neurotype, a part of a person's identity, rather than a disorder that should be treated. We encourage those who love an autistic person to explore the resources provided and learn more about autistic self-advocacy. Autism is a neurotype, and autistic people are as varied as anyone else. If you want to know more about autism, look for autistic people who talk about their autism. Thank you so much for your time. And remember that all people have the capacity to learn, connect, and communicate, even autistic people.